Welcome to No Borders with Brian and Carrie. One question we get asked probably more often than any other question is how we plan our travels. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, and so we've kind of learned a process that works for us. And so today what we want to kind of do is just kind of go through our thought process and what's involved in that and what brings us to making our plans going forward.
Yeah, now we have a general idea of how we're going to proceed throughout the year, but there's a lot of details that, I'll be quite honest with you, Carrie takes care of a lot of the legitimate travel arrangements, but we do have an idea on where we're going to go, how we're going to get there, and how it's all going to work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So the first step that we start with and when I say the beginning of the year, it's not like this is January 1st. It just is
Right.
1 year out from today. And so we generally have an idea what our plan is going to be for a year. But before we do that, we also have a budget set in place. And when we say a budget, we have a general budget. So for instance, last year we spent a little bit more than we probably wanted to spend. We still were totally within our means and our budget, but this year was kind of one of those where like, okay, we want to save a little bit of money.
Right, we spent a little more money last year because of the fast travel through Central Europe. Now, we knew we were going to do that. We knew it was going to cost us more, but we were just coming out of Southeast Asia. So that's where we saved a little bit of money on the front end of that year. We still went over budget, but it was much closer than it would have been if we hadn't have done that.
Right. Yeah. So going into, say, for instance, this year, we knew we just wanted to kind of save because of last year that was a lot. And so in that thought process, one of the things that we really look for to be able to save some money is not only destination, but it's what it costs us to get to that destination and what it's going to cost us to move around that destination.
Right.
So for instance, when you are looking to go to an area, and if we were just to say, well, we're going to hop to Turkey, like we just did, but then from Turkey, I don't know, let's go to Malta or let's go to South Africa or whatever.
Right.
Those tickets sometimes can be really astronomical, and you are now adding those tickets. Say you were only in one destination for a month, you're now adding those tickets to your month budget.
Right.
Not like your year budget so much.
Exactly. I come up with a lot of great ideas. I think I've mentioned this before on where we can go next. And then Carrie sits down and starts plugging and playing with the airplane costs and travel costs in general, whether it be an airplane or a bus or a train or what have you. And sometimes they're great ideas on where we go next, and sometimes they're not. Generally, they're not.
Well, and that's the thing, though, is that it's not a matter of we both come up with really great ideas, and you really don't know if it's going to be feasible and work until we start looking at it. And those things can sometimes change and vary a little bit as well, but we generally get a very good idea what our year is going to look like. So as a really good example, we know what our going forward year from here out is going to look like. So after we go home in July, we're going to be home for a month, and then we're heading to Mexico for 3 months, and then we're going to be home again, and then we're heading to South America.
Yeah, and things can change, and things have changed.
Yeah.
Another good example of things changing is we didn't know where we were going to go this year for the month of June. Because of costs, how much things were going to cost us in the middle of the summertime during travel season. So we had to make an adjustment.
Right, and with that, when we were saying like you can do your research beforehand and you can check pricing and get an idea, well, that's probably one of the best examples right there is we did have a plan in place. We were going to go to Fethiye, Turkey. We were then going to go to Rhodes, Greece, and then Crete, and then we were actually going to be coming back to Bodrum, Turkey. And that was our plan. And before we kind of generally make that plan no reservations are made at this point, but we just kind of have a trajectory plan that where we're going to go. then I started looking at Bozeman as we started making those reservations, and I was like, oh my God, the prices just tripled in price. Now, that can be two reasons. So with their new laws that just went into place with their short-term rentals, but then also, it is in the middle of the summertime, and so availability really cut down. So I think it had more to do with the new rental laws. But either way, it was checked off the list.
It was checked off the list, and we came up with a better idea, a much less expensive idea. Yes. We get the opportunity to go somewhere where we have always wanted to go to, and we didn't even know this was going to be an option until we started plugging and playing with flights, where we can fly and how much it's going to cost to get there. And Budapest came up inexpensive within our budget, so we're going to fly to Budapest, and then from Budapest to Antalya after a month in Budapest for that final dental plan that Carrie has going on. Yes. So that was just something that came out of the blue. We did a little bit of research. We were flexible with our dates, which is also very important.
Very much so.
We get to go someplace where it wasn't in our original plan.
Right. So I would say that the next step, when we've, figured out where we're going to go, we have the idea in place, we've kind of done some general research at this point. The next step that really is the deciding factor is doing our flight searching. And so, that is, you really have to dig deep, and you have to look at all the different options to get to one location or the next. You cannot just, if you want to find those good deals, because so many people have asked us, how do you find these great deals on flights? You cannot just plug in, I'm in this location and I'm going to this location. You sure can do that, but you most likely are not going to just get the best dates or the best prices by doing that. So there's a couple tips that I'm going to give you. Number one, always start your search on Google Flights. You are going to see all the different airlines, and these are some airlines that are not listed when you say go to Expedia and search for a flight. The other thing that you want to do is you want to be, like Brian mentioned, be flexible. So when you are plugging in the dates that you are going to be traveling on, make sure you're looking at the numerous days before or numerous days after. You can on Google Flights look at a map or a calendar, and it's going to give you the prices. And so some of those prices in the middle of the month are, incredibly lower than what they were going to be if you just plugged in the date that you wanted. So that flexibility can save you a lot of money and make a place available that we may have had to be like, nope, we can't go.
Right, and don't be afraid of a layover or two, because you can save a lot of money doing that too. Nobody wants to have a 6-hour layover, but if it saves you a few $100s, it might be worth doing. And we do that more often than I would like to.
Yeah, and and I would say that, we do some layovers, but I'm incredibly picky of our layovers. So we're not doing some stupid long layover that doesn't make any sense from factoring all of the flights that I look at. It's usually a couple hours. You obviously want to save extra time anyways. If it's an international connection, you need that extra time anyways to change planes. But just make sure that you put that extra time into, if you want to save money on flights, it's something you absolutely can do. You just need to go and do the work. Now, another tip on those flights that we do is I will go and we will have a general time frame that we are looking to book a flight or when we want to go. And then you can track those prices. You will see it trending in one direction or the other, and then at that time okay, I need to pull the trigger and we need to go ahead and buy our tickets.
I get that a lot. Brian, we need to buy the tickets right now.
Yeah. So and you'll just get a good feel for what the price range is. So anyways, put the time into doing that. So after we have figured out what it's going to cost us to get to a location by flying there, our next step.
Our next step is usually the Airbnb process or our accommodations, where we're going to stay, how much we're willing to spend in that location. Now, we have upped our budget a little bit on our accommodations, just simply because we feel like we deserve it. To be honest with you.
It's not even so, because that can kind of, you might take that the wrong way, like we deserve it, but we feel like we deserve it. We're older.
Yeah.
And that is one area, so we'll cut corners in a lot of areas, and that's one area we are willing to spend a little bit of extra money because we want to be comfortable.
Well, we deserve it. Absolutely.
Going to stick to that one. Yeah, so so what we start to do is we start to research a whole area that we're going to. So once again, you might have found, okay, we can get there. The flight is cheap. You might even find that the accommodations are super affordable. But then the next step that we need to really look at is, what are all the living costs while you're there? So, you really need to check, what is the average grocery prices? We check, like, what is an average beer going to cost going out at a restaurant to be able to have, or get it at the grocery store and have at home, or a bottle of wine. And the reason we look at those things is because those are the things that we consider as entertainment. We enjoy doing those things. Well, if they're out of our range, then that place is probably not going to be a place we're going to enjoy ourselves a whole lot.
And we start with the beer and the wine just because it's a good standard. If the beer costs X amount of dollars, your chicken and your eggs and your coffee are probably going to cost more.
Right.
And that's we get a general idea on what our accommodations are, not our accommodations, but our grocery bill is going to be. We also look at neighborhoods.
Right.
We really want to look at the neighborhood, not only for safety and things to see, walkability, grocery store access. All those things we take into play when we're planning this out. And sometimes it doesn't work.
And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes one example is we had looked at a place in France. We're like, okay, this works. I think we were in Croatia at the time. We're like, we can just get over to France pretty easily. We found the way to get there for really affordable. The accommodations were actually very affordable. And then we started looking at all the other costs. So like grocery costs and getting around, transportation costs while we're there and everything. And I was like, this is just not in range, So because we, like I said, when we get someplace, we want to enjoy ourselves while we're there as well. So there are a lot of different boxes that have to kind of be checked. So we can plan and we can start at the very beginning and go, this is where we want to go. Right. And then all those things kind of have to line up. So it's really quite a process.
We're also lining up, not just getting to the country, but getting within the country. So now we're going to Mexico in the fall. Where do we start? Where do we end? Where do we fly into? Where do we fly out of? All those things come into play. And I think we got a pretty good plan for Mexico.
We do. We have a really good plan for Mexico. And one of the reasons that we picked the way that we are doing Mexico, so, we definitely want to see the beach areas of Mexico. We've been to some, but more resorty and everything. We do want to go to some of these other beach towns. But when you look at flying from here to there and hopping around, once again, those flights that you take from one destination to the next get added into kind of our monthly budget, and that can really send us through the roof, because Mexico's, as much as everybody kind of goes, oh, Mexico's a cheap place to go, it's really not.
It's really not.
Accommodations are not that cheap. They're actually pretty expensive. And so you kind of have to look at that. Well, so we picked inland areas.
We're going to stay inland this round.
Yep.
Yes.
So for 3 months, we're going to hop inland, because I found that we can get to each location by bus for about $45 to $50 and not a very long bus ride. So I was like, okay, that's going to be really easy, and that's affordable, and that keeps our costs down as well.
Well, and I think it's a great plan too. So we are going to fly from Seattle to Dallas.
Yeah, that's just our layover,
Our layover into San Miguel. So we could have flown from Seattle straight to Mexico City, but again, that's going to cost a lot more, and that kind of ruins the logistics of those bus rides on the 3 different locations that we plan on going to.
Yeah, because it's central of the other 2 locations, so it made no sense.
Right, so we have a great plan in place, but it took a lot of, there's a lot of thought process that went through it for us to not only get the cost down and the logistics set the way where it makes sense.
Now, the other thing that we have to do before we go to a place, and this comes maybe a little bit before we've done some of this other process, is, can we go there? And what is it required of us to go there? So do we need a visa?
Right.
How much is the visa going to cost? How far ahead do we need to plan to get one? Are there any shots required? Anything like that? You want to also do that part of research as well. Because there might be something within there. It might be, once again, if you are planning on going into an area for 2 months, but the visa costs whatever amount of dollars, you're kind of like, oh gosh, that's bringing us now out of our budget range. So once again, just a lot of elements go into place to plan it all out.
And there's also time of year. We get this a lot. What time of year are you going to certain places? Well, our schedule is set now to where we're going to be home for a month or so, 3 times a year. So we want to be home in the Pacific Northwest in the summertime because it's the most beautiful place in the world in the summertime. In the summertime.
It's the most beautiful.
So that's where we want to be for a portion of the summer. And then we're going to go out. But we are going to be skirting those touristy seasons and the hot weather seasons in places like Mexico, like Turkey, Greece. You know, we are going to get some heat, Southeast Asia. But we are skirting that touristy summertime rush, which also saves us money.
It does, and that is just one of the things of same thing again, be flexible. If you just say, you know, because we've gotten comments from people that will say things like, I just can't find Airbnb for less than $4,000 in whatever location. And it's like, okay, I get that. You know, it's not astronomical if you're searching right in the middle of the summer, you want to be right dead in the center of the touristy area. Of course you're going to pay a lot of money. You know, you have to be flexible on all those factors, you know, be out of town a little bit. And when we say out of town a little bit, we're not like way out of town. We can walk to the middle of town every place we pick. And then make sure that you're also really looking at, okay, are there holidays going on right now? Are there, or during the time that we are going to be wanting to travel, you know, maybe that would be adding to your expense as well. Prices might be higher. Or is it during a spring break, or is it the summer holiday, or any of those kinds of things? If you can move your travels around those, you know, and you can't obviously move them around the entire year because you are going to have to travel somewhere in the summer.
We do, and that's sometimes where we spend more money. Last year in Central Europe, we spent more money, but we had to be somewhere.
We had to be somewhere,
you know? So that's where we chose to be, you know, and we chose to be in places less expensive. We're always picking places less expensive. This is a budget channel. We're on a budget, so that's what we do. We want to go to New Zealand. We want to go to Australia. We want to go to the United Kingdom. We want to go to Western Europe, but those places just aren't going to work. Scandinavia, I really want to get to. They're not going to work right now. For these reasons. Now, there might be an opportunity for us to bounce into one of those locations in Western Europe, like Dublin, for a week, like we just did. But other than that, those month-long stays may not be working for us for quite some time.
Right, and that's part of our budget planning. So at the beginning of the year, being that this year was one that we wanted to save some money, that has to do with the following year after that, we then might have a little bit of extra money that we can then hop in and see some of those places, because we are going to make it to all of these places that we want to go. We just have to be smart about it, and we can't just say in 1 year we're going to go to 4 of those. You know, we really do it in a very smart way of, okay, let's pick one of those places. Or I guess we kind of look at it like, let's pick one treat ourselves thing that we want to do this
splurge.
year. So for instance, we want to go on a safari, you know, so one of the years we will be working that into our budget as our extra for that year.
We will be. And you know, and if you're just joining the channel, we do house sit. We go through a website to get house sits. That could be an option on some of these more expensive countries for us to bounce into for even a month. You know, if we're lucky enough to get a house sit that we want to do.
Right, and if you are interested in house sitting, we will have a link down below, and that has saved us considerably. Right now we do it when we are home because we do not have our home base anymore, and so when we are home, so we're not crashing on the family's couch or in their guest bedroom too much, we do house sits. And but that's a great way to, there's house sits all over the world, so you can do those and save yourself a lot of money. So check out that link if you're interested.
So let me ask you this, how far out do we book flights? We're watching for those great deals. We're staying flexible, time of week, time of month. At what point do we decide to go ahead and pull the trigger? How many months out?
Good question. So, you know, we, for a long haul flight, so if we are leaving home or heading home, those flights, we can sometimes book those 3 to 4 months in advance because those are ones that just really, they do vary in price, but the closer you get to your date of flying, you're less likely to find a great deal. Now, those other flights, when we're hopping, say we're planning our travels in between to the next location, we can hold out on those flights because a lot of time those budget airlines, you're going to be able to get a good deal closer up to even a month in advance.
We keep an eye on it. We watch it and make sure that it's not booking up. but as soon as you just kind of keep an eye on it.
You just honestly, I watch those things enough when I'm doing it that I just have a gut feeling now's the time.
Yeah.
So and on Expedia they do have on certain flights, it's not on all of them, they do this deal where if you are a high enough member with them, where you actually get money back if the flight does drop down in price. So that has been really nice as well. Now, as far as accommodations go, accommodations is one of those that you really have to just decide what works for you. So when we first started, we were booking our accommodations out considerably further because we used to always just take trips. And so when we would plan a trip or a vacation, you're looking at an Airbnb and you were like, oh, that's the perfect Airbnb in the perfect location, and you really have your heart set on it. Well, you don't want to lose it.
You jump on it.
And so you jump on it and you get it, right? But for us, because we travel full time, we have really learned the benefit of being, once again, flexible. And we may be in a location, well, if we haven't bought, say, a ticket going forward yet to the next place, and then we end up going like, oh my God, there's this place over here, let's go there instead.
Let's do this instead, right.
We really have learned that we love to have the flexibility to change our mind.
Yes.
And move our dates and plans.
And move our dates, move our plans, change our mind. But it also does come down to time of year. Mm-hmm. If we're booking a place, say, in Mexico in November, we can probably hold out longer than if we were to pick a place in Mexico on the beach in July.
Right.
For example. Yeah. So, you really do have to consider the time of year you're going to a destination. Mm-hmm. When is it their summer or their touristy season? You may have to jump on those a few months earlier than in the off season.
Yeah, going into, so for instance, Greece, we had our stuff booked for our 2 months in Greece about 3 months prior, 2.5 months prior to getting here. We are going right into that prime season. Prices were starting to go up. And what I'll do is I'll go on to, say, Airbnb, and I heart locations. And then what you do is that when you keep going back and checking, there have been times I've said to Brian, like, we've got to book something because all the places that I've hearted are now gone, because all of a sudden those little hearts won't show up on your map anymore. So you'll just kind of learn that you just have to be, it's just one of those, I wouldn't say constant, you don't have to be on there every single day, but it is one of those things that you're going to very much randomly be checking throughout a week, and you'll get a good feel for the prices, you'll get a good feel for how fast the accommodations are moving. Another tip I would give you is that there's always other options you can do. So Expedia has started offering they have on their platform a lot of long-term rentals. And so you can also book through them. Well, some of these will also give you so that you're not paying in advance. So you can just reserve, pay later. So you can do that if, say, you wanted to lock a place in just in case something happens. But then also Booking.com will have locations as well that you will be able to book, and then you don't have to pay until you arrive. And so another way to kind of lock something in place, and then just kind of feel like, okay, at least I've got something, right? And you can make changes if necessary.
Right, and you can kind of keep searching the other platforms as you wish. Yeah, we're not tied into Airbnb in any way.
No.
It's just been convenient up until now. But there are other options that we're starting to explore.
Yeah, and we're starting to use other options. But one of the things that is really great is I know we needed our place in Antalya, and we very much, we hate to spend a whole lot of money way too far forward. Like I said, we're budget travelers. So if you see an Airbnb listing and then you click on it and go into the actual information about payment, so an example would be our place that we got in Antalya, we actually only had to pay, I think it was $120 a head for that. And then the rest of it we don't pay until maybe a week before we get there, which is still a good 2.5 months out from now. So there are those options on Airbnb too. You just have to kind of look for them. So I think the moral of this complete story here is that, when everybody asks how we do plan our travels, we hope this helped first off. But the process is not fast and just quick and easy. It is a stressful process, but I will guarantee you one thing: the process does get easier as you do it. And then also, I've had a lot of people say, like we were saying, when we were going on a trip, say for instance, you would book your accommodations way ahead because you wanted them. Well, then you kind of had this just feeling of relief, right? And then when we started doing this, there was that stress feeling of like, we haven't booked anything yet. We haven't booked anything. And that feeling will start to go away.
It starts to go away, yeah. Now, there are times where Carrie overthinks the bookings and starts to get a little bit stressed out. And I say, just book one, pick one and book it, and then the stress goes away. Now, that's usually within 4 or 5 weeks of where we need to be. So the stress kind of goes up a little bit. I get that. But you have to decide for yourself what you're comfortable with. We met a couple last week that they just booked a place and they're only like 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
So we probably wouldn't do that.
Not for our long stays, because the problem with doing that for a long stay, so if you're only going someplace and you only need, say, a 2-night stay somewhere or something, that's easy.
That's easy.
You can go on Expedia and find it. You can book those a few days ahead of time, no problem. But the problem is when you're looking for a 28-day stay like we do, if somebody goes in and just books 2 nights in the middle of that 28-day stay, that accommodation is now gone.
Right.
And sure, you could move from accommodation to accommodation and pick a couple different ones, but the whole advantage of booking 28 days at a time is because you get the discount that comes with that. So, so I would say for the people like us who do long stays, that booking a little bit further than you may want to sometimes happens, but just relax with the process. Know that you're going to get it all figured out. There is going to come a comfort level in the planning process to where it starts to become easier, to where, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as overwhelming. It still can be. That's why
Let me ask you this. Where would you start? If you were to start the plan, would you start with the accommodations or the flights?
I always start with the flights. So your number one place you're going to start, and that's a great question, because say, for instance, we have only booked 2 locations, or we've decided on 2 locations in Mexico. We haven't decided on our other, which this was the case actually at the beginning. If you hop onto Google Flights and you put in the location you are going to be leaving from, and you're in explore mode when you do this, okay, then you will see on a map what it's going to cost you to fly to wherever you want to go in the world. So if you want to stay in that country or you want to fly to another country, but then you can see what the flights will cost from that area based on what dates you put in or the date range. And that is kind of a cool way for us to sometimes decide. And that's what I did when, like Brian was saying, we are now going to Budapest. And that's what I did, is that I knew we were going to be in Crete. And I'm like, okay, we've got to find someplace, because staying in Greece wasn't an option. Because
it's too expensive.
So expensive. And because we'll be in July, going into July at this point. And so I just put in Crete is where we're leaving from, and this is the day we're leaving. And then I looked at all the option of flights. And Budapest I was able to find for, and we're getting money off of it through our Expedia flight because it keeps going down. So I think it's going to end up being around $100 each for us to fly to Budapest. I'm like, okay, score. That's a great price.
So we booked that.
Yeah. And so, I found that.
You found that.
Then I'm like, okay, now I've got to see what accommodations are going to cost, right? And so, thankfully, accommodations were super affordable compared to what we were looking at having to pay in Greece for another month.
Right. So we got our flight, which is affordable. We got our accommodations, which is affordable. We had no idea we were going to Budapest, but here we go.
And here we go.
Just because we're staying flexible.
We're flexible, and it ended up saving us money. And the next step in that process was we checked what it was going to cost for living costs there too, and those were super affordable as well. So that's just kind of how the process goes.
Works.
I would say it's a constant moving puzzle pieces. It's like it's never totally set in stone. You know, we haven't booked anything for Mexico yet. When we go home is typically, that's not when we do our booking, but that's when we're finalizing everything.
Yes.
You know, so, this year we'll be home for about 6 weeks in the summertime. And we will start actually doing our booking probably pretty close to when we're just at home before we head out for the next time. So, yeah. So
we're gonna fly from Seattle to Dallas. Dallas to San Miguel. Take a bus after a month to Mexico City, and then a bus down to Iztapa.
To Oaxaca.
Oaxaca.
Yes.
Oaxaca.
It gets them every time.
I'm going to pronounce it wrong every time.
Very different, yeah.
Right. So then from there, at the end of our stay in Mexico, we fly out.
Fly back to Seattle.
And it just made sense. It was smooth and it was easy. So that wasn't something that we just came across overnight. that was a planning process.
That was a planning process. You had to look at all the different variations of which was cheaper.
Yes.
Do you fly into Oaxaca first and go the other direction, or you fly in and, and there's just a lot of things to check out. So we hope that this just kind of answered some of your questions about how we do our planning process. If you've been feeling like your planning process is long and just
Stressful,
nerve-wracking and
nerve-wracking.
It just is. It is a process, and we do guarantee that over time it does get a little bit easier to where you can just become a little more relaxed with it as you just do it more and more. So if you want to find us on any of our other networks, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube at Brian and Carrie. And then you can find us on our website, which is brianandcarrietravels.com. A lot of great information on there and links to some of our favorite travel essentials and all kinds of stuff like that. And a free packing list if you're
And a
looking
free
at
packing list.
Yeah.
Sign up for that packing list. And if you are watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Cheers.